Hello, and thank you so much for joining me for this session, Approaching Fellowship Funding for International Students. A special thank you to the International Student Services Center for coordinating these iGrad sessions generally and just providing so many resources. They are in the Melville Library, so if you haven't had a chance to go there, check it out, study there, I highly encourage you to do so. But my name is Ashley Staples. I am the Director for External Fellowships and Scholarly Development, and I'm excited to talk a little bit more specifically than usually I get to folks who are international students who are interested in external funding and maybe how to be thinking about that as a part of their overall graduate and academic careers. So that's really what this session is going to be about. So I hope that's what you are here to learn about. So I am going to actually start with an introduction of myself because I think one of the things that sometimes happens is that you don't really know all the time how someone gets from undergrad all the way to their academic career or the place where they're going. And sometimes it feels like these are very sort of linear pathways. But I will say from my own experience, it has not been a linear pathway. My doctorate is in educational studies, specifically focusing on higher education and student affairs. And I studied interfaith work and how students, faculty, and staff on college campuses make meaning of religious and spiritual and non-religious spaces and what that means for student development, which maybe is not something that you knew about me before. But that is kind of where I ended up. And now I do fellowships work and I really read widely. So I could never have told you when I started down this path that this was where I was going to be. And so I just want that to encourage you that there's a lot of potential transitions in the future. So I actually started my career at the University of Maryland, College Park. I was a business undergrad. I did a great study away program called Semester at Sea. I spent a summer on a ship, and I realized that student affairs are sort of the parts of the university life that are outside of the university are important to me, and also that I had kind of a passion for connecting across borders, like across borders, both, technically, right, going across borders, but also just like different ways of thinking. It was really interesting to me to see how different people in different parts of the world connected. So that was important. But right out of undergrad, I had to get a job, right? Because sometimes you just have to get a job. So I worked in human resources for a couple of years. I figured out I really did want to be back in the space with college students. So I got a position in residence life, which is overseeing like residence halls and dormitories at a small school called Stevenson University. I was there for a few years. And then to stay in that industry, you basically need to get a master's degree, right? You have to kind of invest in yourself, make sure you have the knowledge in order to keep going in the field. So I went to North Carolina State University and I got my master's. I got a administrative graduate assistantship to help me fund that experience, so that I could, go there. And that was a huge part of how I chose what master's degree I was going to get and where was the funding picture, because that was important to me. Afterward, I did a job search and I ended up getting a great position in residence life still at NYU downtown in New York City. And I was there for 5 years. And kind of during that time, I knew that I did a research thesis during my master's degree. I actually got the MS, so that I kind of had that thesis option available to me. I knew I kind of wanted to go into the doctoral route, but I wasn't sure exactly how it would happen. So I actually applied for and started as a doctoral student in a more sort of practical professional program at NYU. And then that got interrupted a little. My advisor got a new position at Ohio State University, and he asked if I wanted to come and research on a grant that he already had studying interfaith interactions across campuses in the US. And so I said yes. Also, where's Ohio? But then I moved to Ohio and I finished my PhD there. And I also was a postdoc in Ohio working on those same projects, two different grants. But for 2 years, I was a postdoc on two different grants working on those same projects after I graduated. During that time, I wanted to work on my teaching experience, try and figure out, the academic path. So I became an adjunct professor at University of Missouri, Kansas City, actually through a connection previously. And that kind of got me on the path of teaching and being an instructor of record and having that experience. But I really also wanted to have another great international experience. And so I actually applied for and became a Fulbright scholar as an early career researcher, working basically with some scholars in England who were replicating the study that I worked on as a graduate student and a postdoc at Ohio State University, they were replicating that study in England. And so I went and I was able to basically postdoc with them for a year as a Fulbright scholar at Durham University. And there I was housed, because they don't have quite the same lay of the land in terms of higher education. I was in the theology and religion faculty or school department. And the people I was working with are sociologists of religion, because again, the professionalism of these industries is a little different. So I got a whole other aspect of what that looks like by doing that. And that also kind of clued me in that, people need help figuring out some of how this happens, right? Like, how do I move through my career? What kind of funding opportunities are there? There have to be positions that are helping with this. And there were. I actually found some through Times Higher Education first, because I was searching both in England and in the US for next steps. And then eventually I ended up here at Stony Brook University as the director for external fellowships. So if you had asked me when I graduated from the University of Maryland if I would end up at Stony Brook University as a director of fellowships, I would have looked at you with really big googly eyes and not had anything to say to you. But this was kind of my path. And so I hope that this is encouraging, that there are a lot of arrows on here, and I am not done with my career. I expect there probably will be more down the line. And so if you're kind of feeling like, I just don't know where I'm headed, I just want to encourage you that that's okay, right? The world changes, we change as it changes, and we don't always know exactly where we're going to go next. But I think having some of the tools that I'm going to present today can be really helpful for folks who are trying to figure out what your next step is, and also to have the ability to see the next step as maybe an opportunity or an exciting next thing to be doing, rather than being like, oh gosh, what am I going to do? And I think at this time in our world, that's especially important, because some of what I share with you today, I honestly don't know if I would be able to share that with you in a couple of weeks, right? And that's kind of where our funding picture is right now. And so I hope that you will sort of come along with me today on this journey and really kind of press into what we can control and what we can do, and then let the rest sort of sort itself out. So I know that's kind of a very broad space. If we want to create more space for that later, you can feel free to email me. But that is sort of where the approach is coming in for today. So in addition to sharing my story, I wanted to actually kind of bring this back to you. And I ask you to kind of think about, if you have a piece of paper, maybe you can jot this down. And you see only in this sort of like inevitable stories idea, maybe if you locate yourself at the yellow bubble here, maybe you can think it has one straight line there, but maybe it was kind of a winding path, right? Before you ended up here where you were. I would encourage you to think about, like, what are all the different things that had to come together for you to get here? Because I think that can be really helpful when you're looking forward at the potential different paths that you can take going forward, to think about, like, well, it took all this to get me here. So what are all the things that may happen with me going forward in the future? And when you're thinking about fellowships and grant opportunities and things like that, this idea of inevitable stories, and that you can have multiple inevitable stories, is really important. Because when we think about the idea of a funding opportunity, you really have to think about, okay, what inevitable story makes this funding opportunity the right one for me, or this path forward the right one for me? And that doesn't necessarily mean that path A is more right than path B, or more right than path C. And that can be a little bit existential to actually, dig into. But hopefully at the end of the presentation today, you'll start to see what I mean by that. There's multiple ways to kind of move forward. But as you can see, all of these arrows are kind of in the same trajectory. So just because there's different paths on that trajectory that you might be taking, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're getting off your trajectory or not doing what you're hoping to do with your career or with your life's path, but just that there might be several different ways to get there. And to kind of open this up a little bit, I want to tell you a little bit about Murphy. Murphy is a puppy, and Murphy is the dog of a person that I worked with, and I just love this metaphor. And also, you get to look at a cute dog picture for a second. So Murphy knows what he loves. All right, so this is Murphy, and oh no, know if it will go for you. In this case, it's this hose. So Murphy like runs around with this hose. He loves it. He runs all the way around. But what Murphy really actually loves is holes. He loves digging holes in everything. And so he really figured out how to leverage his love of the hose, which makes him very happy, into creating holes. So he takes that hose, he runs around with it. It's very cute, but then eventually he buries the hose in the ground so that it makes the ground really, really soft. And he's able to kind of leverage that to create a hole, right? Because before the ground was hard, it was hard to have a hole. Now the ground is very soft and he's able to do it. Well done, Murphy. He's figured out how to use one thing that he loves, this hose, right, in order to get to another thing that he loves. And in some ways, I know this is maybe a little bit funny, but this is kind of the same thing we're talking about with a funding search, figuring out how to use the things that you are already doing in order to move forward and get the next thing that you want out of that scenario. And you can see kind of what Murphy doesn't have, right, is magic or modern Marvel solution, right? He doesn't have a genie in a lamp that's digging a hole for him. He doesn't have a fairy godmother. He doesn't even have like a hole digger. That would be great. And sometimes I talk to students often who are coming to me wanting kind of like a magic funding solution. And so I encourage you and everyone actually to think about funding creatively, strategically, what it can do for you, but also, you know, these magic funding solutions are kind of not there. A lot of times students are really surprised when I say that most of the time the students who are most successful in funding searches are actually thinking about their funding 2, 3, 4 years in advance because they're really planning on what, you know, how am I making myself the best candidate, but also how am I lining myself up for these opportunities? How am I thinking about them? How am I getting my stakeholders involved? And I do a number of workshops about those things. I have a grant writing skills series that goes through that. So I'm not going to go over all of that information today, but I do want to encourage you that this is the approach that I'm going to put out today is not an approach where you're thinking right now this semester about funding for next semester. That's not the kind of timeline that most external funding works on. So really thinking about kind of what's the long-term plan and how do you incorporate external funding opportunities into that plan. So in terms of the approach, I think this is probably the most important thing. And maybe you can identify yourself here. So I think when I was looking at the list of folks who are here, we have several first-year folks, we have several third-year folks, we have a lot of people who are kind of at different places. And so maybe you consider yourself an early career grad student, a mid-career grad student, a late career grad student, or a postdoc. And these are the types of opportunities that are typically available to students across the spectrum. And so I want to kind of put that out there because sometimes it's even sort of at these different stages, like what exactly can I apply for? What makes sense in terms of my career? Now, I know that this is specifically for international students. And so for the most part, I haven't included, for example, the fellowship opportunities that you might be able to apply for in your country that kind of get you here. And that's something that I think sometimes students I talk to are a little bit surprised about, is that there's not as much sort of government funding once you're here from the US government to be able to stay here or continue. And I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. But all of these kinds of funding are available through different kinds of funders to students regardless of discipline and regardless of citizenship. It just depends what kind of planning that you're doing in advance to figure that out. And it also depends on what industry you're in and what you are studying and how that is funded. There are some types of research and education spaces that are more well funded than other types of research and education spaces. And I get that. That can be very frustrating, but that's also the reality. And so I'm trying to kind of skirt that line of having positivity, but also being very realistic about what might be some of the challenges when you go to actually figure out what funding could be available. Uh, Things that external funding is often sort of designed to help you do as a student. Or a postdoc. One is to get a new aspect of your research agenda or your career off the ground. So maybe you are kind of approaching the point where you have something new, novel that you've seen and you want to keep going with that. Something new, a new aspect of your career, something like that. Those are the kinds of things that often funders are looking to actually help you fund. The external funding can help you establish like a good early career position with post PhD funding or opportunities. So thinking about what are those transition points. So on this slide, you saw like early career to mid career to late career to postdoc. Often funding is happening at the transition points between the one and the other. So for example, an early career fellowship, if you had a predoctoral opportunity, that gets you into mid-career and late career. The mid-career ones get you into late career. The late career ones get you into postdoctoral positions. So thinking about what those transitions are. You also might have the opportunity to establish a record of funding. And this is where some smaller dollar grants might make sense to make sure that you have that record, because funding does beget funding. So if you can show that you were able to sort of secure and steward smaller amounts of funding, sometimes that's a good record to be able to have on your CV. And that could be for going to annual meetings, that could be for conferences, that could be smaller dollar amounts that let you do something sort of adjacent to the research that you're already doing in your space. You can affirm good work. So a lot of times external funding opportunities might affirm work that you're already doing through prizes, or maybe dissertation related funding, which I'll talk a bit more about later. But that can be funding where you have already put in a good amount of work to something, and now you're kind of getting it onto a wider stage. And then it can also help you to extend the reach or scope of your research activities. And these are the types of things that external funders typically are looking to fund. And so this is a little bit general, right? I would need to speak with you a little bit more, maybe individually, to figure out if you like what exactly this means for you. But typically, for the most part, external funding doesn't necessarily provide more funding for things that you're already doing. So continuing your studies, continuing your research that you're doing here on Stony Brook's campus, continuing your current experience as an international student. They're looking for these transitions. And that's true for international students, and often that's actually true for domestic students as well. So just so you know, this is completely just an international student sort of issue. And I work with students all the time who like, this is really what they need or want. And so I understand that the fact that funders don't really fund that is frustrating. Like I understand. And so hopefully through this, you might be able to start looking for what those transition points are where funding might be able to come in and kind of help. Funding is also not usually geared toward sort of private good investments. So often higher education is viewed as like a public good. So investments in public good spaces tend to be better funded. Private good investments where you're sort of investing in your own social mobility. Maybe you're taking this degree so you're more qualified so that you can get a job, or something's a little more industry focused. There are a couple of caveats to this that I'll put out there later. But typically if it's going to it seems like it's more of a private, good personal development for your own sort of ability to exist in the workforce. That's not as well funded by external funders. And typically, most external funding doesn't take the place, there are not opportunities for it to take the place entirely of traditional funding mechanisms in academia. There are some awards that are fellowships that can kind of take the place of stipends and things like that, but typically those are not actually for an entire program. So you would still have to have some other traditional kind of academic funding mechanisms in place to do that. There are benefits beyond the funding. And so sometimes I get the questions of like, if it's a long shot, right? Like, why would I try? What would I do? And I think if you're in the academic enterprise, understanding that you are sort of writing for your life most of the time, whether it's a grant, applying for fellowships often is the same set of skills that you might need to apply for a grant, something later. And even if you don't win the award, there's a lot of sort of side benefits in the process. Sometimes even just, making sure your stakeholders are in order so that when you go on the job market later, you've had a lot of great conversations with those folks and they can kind of help you with what you're doing. That can be really important. So these are, again, some of the ideas that I get into a little bit more in some of my other sessions. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time here, but I do think that there's a lot of benefits in the application process. And as someone who sits in the professional development space of the graduate school, we really lean into that because, to be honest, most of our awards that we have students go out for are highly competitive. Even the ones that many students, we have 10 students perhaps win. That's out of 100 students who are able to apply, and that's out of maybe 10,000 applications across the country. And so those numbers are tough no matter what's going on. And so just kind of making sure that there's as much benefit to the individual student who's applying throughout the process and not just in the win or not win kind of category is really important to us here in the graduate school, and personally important to me as the overseer of these efforts. So I want to put out some options to consider. So these are some types of awards and some types of funders, and everything that's up here today specifically is are all options that are available regardless of citizenship. So these are all things, and this is not an exhaustive list, it's a curated set of opportunities that I've tried to kind of put across disciplines. And then I will also show you in a moment how to search for funding, because I think that's a key part of having an approach, is really figuring out, okay, well, how do I actually like look at some of the databases that I have access to and figure out what kinds of things might make sense for me. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a number of things that external fellowships or fund, right? So then awards are kind of a key piece. And so this could be a travel award, this could be a paper award, it could be a grad student award. And I want you to kind of look at these options, but I want to pull out a couple of keywords. So one is society and organization and association. So a lot of awards that are available across citizenships are actually hosted by associations. Some of them are big awards where it's, you know, full funding for a few years if you're working on specific things. Some are smaller awards. We're not sure with the federal funding picture here in the US. Perhaps associations and other organizations like that will step up a little bit more with their funding. But most organizations know that they are serving graduate students in some way, shape, or form. Most organizations have a graduate student rate that you can actually get. So like for $30 a year or something like that, you can be a member of this organization, and that gives you access to be able to apply for their various funds. Most of these organizations also host maybe a journal or some other academic sort of component. They might have an annual meeting. So in addition, by being a member, you're kind of included in that cohort, right, of scholars. And so that can be important. And then often they have awards by association, and then these associations also have lists of awards that tend to be relevant to their constituents. So they have like different folks who are working on these kinds of things. So for example, the Materials Research Society, I'll send out these slides. If you click on that, it goes to their list of association awards. So if this happens to be your area, you can kind of do that. The Organization of American Historians, they do a dissertation award, and that's actually for sort of after the fact. So if you're thinking, you know, I'm getting close to the end, what, you know, how do I start to establish a record of funding? What could I look for there? Putting your dissertation together in sort of a condensed format for a dissertation award might be something that would make sense for you. We also have sort of discovery awards. So the Blavatnik Award for Young Scientists is a region-based award. So you can put in for that award if you're a postdoc here at Stony Brook and you've made like a contribution that you think is great. That's something that you can put in and kind of go for. And that is predicated on the fact that you're a postdoc here at Stony Brook, and again, across citizenship. So different kinds of awards fund different things and in different amounts. So it's important to sort of think about that, but really focusing on who are the, you know, what are the organizations that are overseeing the work that I do? This is a great place to look at the publishers that you might work with in your industry, in your area. A great place to look at who hosts your annual meetings and conferences. You know, what are the places, what are the listservs that you're encouraged to be on? And make sure you're really like looking at those pages and those things to figure out, you know, what association should I be involved in? Who's going to be sharing the information that's relevant to me about potential funding opportunities? Another sort of opportunity is the idea of a prize. So the Regeneron, every year they run a Regeneron Prize for Innovation. This is more of kind of a public-private partnership prize where your best and brightest idea, you can pitch it to Regeneron, and then they will you know, they select several, and if you're selected to work on it, then you kind of see that forward. Of course, that has some intellectual property considerations and things like that. But if you're happen to be in an industry where that makes sense, then maybe that would be something to be looking for, is the prizes for having some of the best and brightest information. I know that there are other folks who are involved in like hackathons and some things like that that have sort of similar ideas, but the Regeneron is one that we work with every year. There's also paper awards, like so, and this happens to be a postdoctoral prize, but there are graduate student ones as well, where maybe you've written a really great essay or really good paper. Maybe it's for a society or for a journal or something like that, but you can put that work that you've done perhaps for a class or something already here at Stony Brook up and be able to get some money for it. And often students will use that for new computers or travel awards or just regular expenses. It's usually sort of no holds barred like prize awards. And so we've had students put, you know, things in for several of those awards, and over time that adds up. And it also demonstrates kind of your ability because you're being recognized on this national stage. So it contributes to that CV, and it also contributes to your record of funding. You can put that on there as well. Industry awards. So this is kind of that in-between place that I talked about. So these are all kind of machine learning, computer science awards. That's where the majority of industry awards are right now. So Google, Apple, and Two Sigma, among others, run PhD fellowships programs every year. We just did the Google one. The Apple one comes up in August, and I think Two Sigma is in like September. But these types of awards are ones where, you know, your faculty would nominate you. There's an internal competition. Stony Brook can only put forward so many folks for this. And these are really, you know, they're industry awards. They're kind of focused on, you know, some of those maybe private sector goods a little bit more, but they're very much predicated on academic success. So there's, you know, having a good record of publication, having things out there that have been cited, you know, all that kind of thing. So these are industry awards tend to be a little bit later in your graduate career that this you're going to have the credentials that you need to be really competitive for these awards. And so these are ones that aren't maybe early career, but once you're in that mid-career to late career, you can start to think about. I think all of these awards only offer up to 2 years of funding. So if you think about it's sort of like when you might have 2 years of funding left, that's kind of what these awards are geared toward. And then international fellowships. So these are ones if you are trying to go abroad for to do your dissertation research or perhaps to do a postdoctoral stint somewhere after your graduate degree. These are all awards where the country or union, in the case of the European Union, of interest is pulling students to that particular country. So the Humboldt Research Fellowship pulls students to be postdocs in Germany. The Mary Sklodowska-Curie Actions pulls folks who want to be postdoctoral scholars in the European Union. The Fulbright Postdoctoral and Early Career Awards, those can pull people into different countries as postdocs or scholars, depending on what you're doing there. Postdoctoral Fellowships for Research in Japan, again, it's a pulling award. Where they are citizenship independent. So they're pulling not just sort of US folks, but scholars from all across the world to that particular country. And so these can be interesting ones to think about, again, at those transition stages. So if you're going from mid-career to late career and you're thinking about, oh, you know, it would be really good if I could get to X country and try and do this work there so that, and that's what I want to write my dissertation on. Or, you know, I'm interested in doing work and I've encountered this scholar who's doing this great work in this other country. Let me see if I can put together a postdoctoral pitch to be able to do that work somewhere else. So those are the kinds of awards that you can think of in terms of international. And then transition fellowships and grants. And so these are probably the ones that I have the most question marks about right now, to be honest. But these awards are typically for sort of later career folks who are thinking about what their next steps are into academia. And they are often, even though the pre-doctoral or earlier career opportunities for these are citizenship specific in terms of being US citizens, the later career ones or the transition grants are actually usually across the board, but they are specific, right? So you have to be researching something very specific that aligns with these calls in order to be eligible for these awards. And so it's helpful to kind of look at these, have a good sense of whether or not you might be eligible or not eligible for them, and be building toward them, because you need to, again, have that 2 to 3 year timeline in advance where you're thinking like, oh, I do want to do this, so I need to get these publications in so that I'm ready to do this, so that I have this support to be able to build toward these kinds of awards. The nice part is that if you have one of these awards, you know, in mind, all of those efforts will probably also make you very eligible to apply for other awards that are maybe don't require quite as much timeline and advanced planning, but will sort of be predicated on similar types of metrics in terms of your readiness and ability to actually apply for them. So as I said, all of these sort of options are ones that I will, you can explore. I will send these out. All of these that you're seeing that are kind of in blue are live links. So if any of them looked interesting to you, you'll be able to click on them and see what's happening there. And so clearly, you know, you might have heard something that you're like, oh, that sounds really interesting. You might not have. And I totally understand that. So funding that fits is really important. Again, I go over this in the grant writing series, so I won't belabor this point here. But the first two parts of this, which is basically like how anyone gets from idea to actually submitting and potentially winning an award, is to explore what opportunities are available available, and then identify and strategize which ones you are going to really focus on. The developing your materials, like once you figure out what award that is, the develop your materials, engage in the review processes, and submit. Those are the ones that you can contact me. I'm happy to work with you on those things. I do reviews all the time on different folks' essays, make sure that they're as aligned with the funder as possible, so many things. I can also help with the identification and strategizing, but exploring opportunities can be really quite individual. I don't know what all of your inevitable stories are. I don't know what the twists and turns your life have taken are. And so being able to look at a call and figure out what's going on and if that one is right for you is pretty key. So what I want to do just briefly, and I'm going to ask the audience because I am going to go through just a couple of these search tools really quickly on the video so that you can see them. So the first one I want to look at, and I think you should be able to see, can I get a thumbs up if you can see the Graduate College, University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So this particular one, I'm going to go back actually to yeah, here we go. So this is kind of the homepage, right? And I encourage you to use this one first, just because it's intuitive. So I'm going to show you another one that you have access to because of our Office of Sponsored Programs and Research. I'll show you another one in just a second called the Pivot Database, but it's a bit more clunky and a little harder to get going with. And so I want to show you this one first, just because I think it's easier to get going and sort of see some things in the areas that you want. So I'm going to do field all just because we have a wide variety of folks here. I really like this one because it has an international students demarcator, right? So these are awards that are available for international students. I'm going to go ahead and do all here just because who knows what you're doing, but I am going to restrict it to fellowships and grants just for fun. I am going to put unrestricted here. That's just because this is hosted by the University of Illinois. So if you don't do unrestricted, sometimes you get awards that are only available to University of Illinois students. And then I'm just going to hit search and see what comes up. And 503 results come up, right? Like that feels like a lot of results. And you can see here when you're looking that a lot of these that are coming up, you can see like academy, society, administration, association, some foundations, things like that. So just thinking about what I had said before about associations, organizations often being ones that are less restricted from a citizenship standpoint, so that you can immediately see that kind of reflect in here. Also, the word association is sort of early on, right? But you can see one of the other things I like about this is this particular search tool is you can see kind of the amount here. You can also sort by deadline. So if you sort by deadline, you can see like some of these are continuous, some of them have varies, and then you kind of get into the ones that are coming up the next one. So if you're trying to figure out, is there anything I can apply for right this second that will maybe get me some funding within the next few months, like this is one way that you can at least look for that if that's something that you're thinking that you need. I will say for the most part, the fellowship cycle is to apply about one academic year before. So right now we are helping students understand the possibilities that they can apply for over the summer and into the fall. They would hear about whether or not they receive the funding for those opportunities in like the winter and or spring. And those that funding would probably go into effect, maybe starting July 1st of the following year or into the beginning of the academic year. So it really just kind of depends on the fellowship itself. That's not all of them. But you can also see these dollar amounts, things like that. So there is a button over here. So if you're looking for like fuller funding or supplemental funding, annual stipend of at least 10,000, that will kind of get rid of some of those ones that are maybe smaller dollar amounts. Maybe your early career, you want the ones that are smaller dollar amounts because you're more likely to be able to get them. Don't click that button then. But this one, maybe that makes sense for you. And so when you go through here, you can kind of start to see. So I don't know what any particular person is, but I know we have some child psychologists here on campus. And so this one is the American Psychological Association, again, and this is a child psychology graduate fellowship. And it tells you right in here what kind of support it provides. It's 1 year, what you have to do for doctoral candidacy, how much the award is actually for, and what the application process is about. So if it says anything like this, limited competition, limited admission, et cetera, then you would reach out to me, right? If it says anyone can apply, then you are welcome to reach out to me because I'm always happy to support you. But you could probably like keep going on your own a little bit. This, again, it's the University of Illinois. It kind of tells you what the University of Illinois procedure is. But then importantly, at the bottom, either way, they always have the URL for the actual fellowship itself. So you might go ahead and note this down, right? This is dissertation research. Maybe your early career, this is what you're studying. You're not quite there yet, but you want to go in that direction. So now that you kind of have a sense and maybe you are starting to put a list together of the different ones from here that you might be interested, you're like, I wonder what else is out there that maybe this particular database doesn't cover. That's a great moment to go to the pivot database. And you can get here literally by searching Stony Brook pivot. It's like the first thing that comes up. And I will actually just, in case you want to, because you're welcome to put a file in here or put a profile together in here, and it'll actually email you opportunities once you fill out your profile so that you're actually getting fed some of this information rather than having to go out and look for it. But if you go to Pivot here, you use your institutional login, so you can type in Stony Brook, it'll redirect you to here. I don't know if it'll ask me for the special numbers or not. No, it looks like I'm good. So it'll redirect you to here, and then you can fill this out, that's fine. But also if you just want to like see what's out there, you can go to funding. And then I usually go to advanced search from there, and you can start to figure out some keys. So I just did the, just because this is what we just looked at, I could search for child psychology and just kind of see what's out there, right? So I have 74 results. And look, this one that I had happened to click on in the other one is the first one. And what that really helps me do between the one that's a little easier to use and this one is to triangulate, okay, I'm in the right spot, right? And so then I can look through some of these other ones and see like, okay, do I have more associations? Are there other associations that have come up that I haven't seen yet? Are there ones that are for something more specific that I want to look for? Are there ones I haven't seen before? Just any number of things you can sort of start to look for. You also will see in this one more than in the University of Illinois one, that there are fellowships that are being awarded in other currencies, right? And so thinking about like, oh, is this an international fellowship? Is it for maybe it's your home country currency and that's helpful to you? Maybe it's not. And so do you want to go to that country? What does that look like? So moving around in this space, like I said, there's more opportunity, like there's more in this database. And so that's really helpful in some ways. And in other ways, it can get a little bit overwhelming if you don't have like a plan for going through it. I also want to throw out just a couple of these other things that, again, the links are there for. So this is the EurAccess Researchers in Motion database. So this is opportunities, funding and job opportunities in Europe. So again, if you're getting to that transition point where you're thinking about where am I going to go next with my career, this might be an opportunity for you. I really like this database was new to me just a couple of weeks ago. Actually, I hadn't seen this before. I had heard about it, but I hadn't figured out how to find it. And this is non-NIH funding opportunities. So I know we have a number of people on the call who are in like health research, but a lot of NIH funding opportunities are restricted to US citizens. So this is non-NIH funding opportunities. And you can see like some of these are based on country of origin and things like that, but they're open to a different set of folks, but they're still related very much to like NIH related things. So if you happen to be in a lab that does a lot with NIH, this list could be very helpful for you. And then I just wanted to show you like one of the industry fellowships. So this is pretty typical for one of the industry fellowships. It's a very slim sort of website, unlike an NIH fellowship or something like that, which has tons of information. These ones have very little information, but you can always, again, contact me for help if you're navigating one of these ones that has that. So hopefully, I mean, that was quick. I wanted to like I said, not spend time on the same things that I've gone over in some of my other sessions. But I did want you to make sure, because so much of approaching fellowships is figuring out which ones you're actually eligible for and which ones might actually fit your inevitable stories going forward. So I'm going to wrap up just so I have plenty of time for questions. So I'm getting close to kind of the end of my slides, but I hope that, as we've talked about this approach, I understand that it can be a little bit of a challenge, a little bit daunting sometimes, but hopefully you can start to see that there are a variety of places in your graduate journey as an international student that external funding might come into play. And so sometimes I do understand that like where you really want it to come into play is not always the place where it seems like that's possible. But I do want to encourage you that there are ways to keep thinking about external funding, and that no external funding is sort of guaranteed. I think that that's something that it can often feel, I work with students across the board, both international students and non-international students, who really want a certain, they sort of have an idea in their head of what would be most helpful to them at that point in their academic career. And that's just like not how the funding exists or is available. But that doesn't mean not to keep external funding in the mix of your overall forward trajectory as a student. Not only because applying has all of these extra professional development pieces, but if you do win, then indeed you have the additional funding that you were hoping for and sort of need. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording and open it up for Q&A. I saw that at least one sort of question or idea came through in the chat while I was talking, so I'll start with that. But I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording for now so that people can feel free to pop on. Ashley, did you want to say anything before I wrap up the recording?
That was really great. Thank you so much for hosting this. I'm actually a doctoral student myself, so I actually learned a lot from this as well. So yeah, thank you for coordinating this with us.
Yeah, awesome. All right, so those of you watching on the video, feel free to reach out if you need me, and I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now, and we'll open it up to the room.